All right, on to Chapter 12 as Bentley and Slally set off on their quest to find the Stone of Ra. The land was dry. Dust whitened the brush along the dirt road in the forest. As the sunlight gave way to shadow, the aroma of the exhausted earth and scorched foliage hung in the motionless air. It was as if a plague were murdering the world by sucking all moisture from it. West of the potato fields, Bentley had veered off the highway onto an unpaved road. His bicycle rattled so loudly on the bumps and ruts that he had to stop periodically and listen to the second air with his eyes closed. If the heartbeats and panting of the dying bobcat were louder, he rode on. If they got fainter, he backed up and tried another road. The woods grew darker. The sky turned a soiled ochre. He had ridden about 2 miles into the labyrinth of forest roads and paths when he skidded his bicycle to a stop at a fork. A road curved off sharply to the left. He closed his eyes again. The gasping breath and labored heartbeats were strong in the second air. Bentley turned his bike and rode up the new road to the bend. Okay. The panting of the bobcat was no longer just in the second air. It was part of the subdued murmur of the wilderness. The faint trickle of water in a ditch, the pulsing chirp of crickets. He laid down his bicycle, stood in the middle of the road, and listened again for the bobcat's sound. It was somewhere near him. Bentley was suddenly seized by an urge to get out of there before it was night. He whirled around and looked back down the road. He saw nothing except the dusty tracks in the low, unmoving forest. He recalled Dr. Christine's words about relying on his own willpower. He told himself he was being dumb. There was nothing to be scared of. Unpersuaded, he knelt in the road and peered under the bushes. He saw darkness on one side. He saw a wall of granite. His heart was beating fast. He saw some spreading ferns in front of the rock. Then, as his eyes grew accustomed to the dim light, he saw the bobcat. Bentley shivered. He looked up at the pallid sky. The ospreys were circling so high above him that they were mere dots of light, but he could plainly hear them. "The Lord of all treacheries bestows our brother's death," they whistled. Their shrilling penetrated the forest. Still kneeling in the road, Bentley looked at the bobcat again. It lay panting among the ferns. Bits of tree bark and twig were tangled in its sickly fur. Bentley saw the emaciated ribcage rising and collapsing beneath the unkempt pelt. The cat's tufted ears twitched slightly. Its dull eyes stared back at Bentley. "Twice he summoned me from my hunting ground," whispered the voice of the doomed animal on the second air. "I was powerless and could not resist him." Bentley put his arms around his legs and shivered again. "At his command, I have not paused to hunt or eat for many days. I am starving." "You killed Helga for him," Bentley said softly. The bobcat closed its eyes. Child, this is the way of our kind. We have no names. We have no deaths. We exist to beget and die so that we may come again in the new season as our own progeny." "How did he make you do it?" Bentley whispered. The bobcat opened his eyes and gazed up at him. "He grasped my will, and I did not serve myself. I killed and took the stone to a distant hill. Even in death he commands me. I returned to this place because it was here I first saw him." The eyes hooded again. Bentley stared at the animal. He didn't hate Helga's murderer. He realized that the bobcat was as helpless as he was. "Where did you take the stone?" he asked gently. Bobcat's eyes remained closed. Its nostrils spread its pink nose apart as it inhaled feebly. "I traveled to the deserted village, across the windy highlands, north around the lake." The eyes half opened. There were hares for the taking, water snakes to be eaten. Bentley nodded. The bobcat's body suddenly convulsed. Its legs jerked inward toward the hollow belly, then slowly unfolded. Beyond the marshes, a hill rises that was sacred to ancient men. He commanded me to put the stone there among the roots of the oldest flowering tree. I know where that is, Bentley said, his heart filled with pity and fear. Our class went there. It's called Indian Hill. The bobcat's eyes looked at him. The land has no names. I left the stone where mice sleep beneath the roots. So great was his power I did not touch them. Avenge me. Bentley reached out slowly to stroke the head of the dying animal. The bobcat's eyes flew open wide. Do not touch me, it hissed. I will rip you as long as instinct lives within me. I will mangle you with the power of my last heartbeat, as long as the betraying lord possesses me. May the hatred he scrapes from the husks of lost love strangle him. The eyes grew dim again. My night is coming, and there will be no dawn to stalk the ground pig in his dewy meadow. The eyes looked back at Bentley. Avenge me. I'm going to get back the stone and make him pay, Bentley said. I'm going to make him pay for everything. Behind you. Bentley spun around so violently that he sat down hard in the dust. Slally stood at the bend of the road, holding her bicycle. Its wire basket was stuffed with a brown paper bag. Don't sneak up like that, Bentley called in a desperate whisper. He wondered if he should warn her about the bobcat. Slally put down her bike. She tugged the paper bag out of the basket. She said Bentley was the one who had been sneaking right out of the house without waiting for her. I told you I had to do it alone, Bentley shot back. Even Dr. Christine said so. He was still trembling, and his stomach was clenched. Slally walked over and sat down beside him. Bentley looked beneath the ferns. He could just see the bobcat. Its body was stretched out flat, and seemed longer. Its ribs weren't moving anymore. It was dead. I found out where the stone is, he said. A place they call Indian Hill. He stood up. It's getting too dark to go home. I'll make a lean-to. I wish I'd brought some matches so we could have a fire. Slally dumped out the brown paper bag. A loaf of white bread, a packet of salami, a box of kitchen matches slithered out onto the road. Bentley inspected the provisions. He was still furious at her for following him and scaring him, but he was glad she was there. The trees and bushes were turning black. Bentley could protect her instead of trying to protect himself all alone. Okay, he replied to her unspoken question, but cut out the sneaking. A half-mile away, Willie Bill eased his pickup truck onto the side of the road. Low branches scraped across the metal roof. Willie Bill switched off the ignition and stepped out onto the road. He looked up at the new moon, then he spat in the dust. 8 minutes, okay. The moon rose, and the scorched day poured its sear brilliance into the sunset. The air of the northern coast reeked with human wrath. Prince Ombra possessed Charlie Phoebe completely. Charlie lay flat on his back on the 4th floor of his hotel. He wasn't hurt, but he couldn't move. A wall Charlie had been demolishing had fallen on him, pinning his left leg in the knee-deep rubble. He was gasping hard from his last floppings and writhings like a beached fish. All around him there were heaps of timbers, window frames, doors, and broken plaster. In weeks of frenzied wrecking, Charlie had turned the 4th floor into a vast, barn-like space. But the torn-up walls and floors had yielded nothing except dust and rat droppings. He found no jewelry. He lay wheezing, looking at the ceiling. It was getting dark. The wall toppling on him was the ultimate indignity. Bentley Ellicott had claimed that Mrs. John Rutherford Hackett had hidden a fortune in jewels all over the hotel. He had inflamed Charlie's hopes, but there weren't any jewels. Bentley was the enemy of Charlie Phoebe and Charlie's god. He shouted curses into the gloom around him. Downstairs, somebody slammed the front door. Charlie tilted back his head and shrieked profanities anew. Then he yowled for help. Ombra, lord of all misapprehensions, enchanter who alters mortal minds with hopeful to hateful visions, had turned his full power on Polly Woodhouse. In recent weeks, Polly had come to understand Mrs. Talley's brusque way of expressing affection. Polly liked the older woman's manner, their mutual understanding of the snappish phrases, and the appearance of irritation bound them together. Earlier that day, when Polly arrived for lunch, Mrs. Tally had presented her with a pair of rain boots. Polly didn't know how to accept presents. For a moment she had hesitated in embarrassment. "Don't be a fool," Mrs. Tally had said. "Here, take them, you silly girl." Suddenly, inexplicably, Polly was filled with an indignation that came from nowhere. She walked out of Mrs. Tally's house. She lay on her bed in the trailer that all afternoon, getting angrier and angrier at Mrs. Tally's assumption of a maternal role in her life. Polly didn't want another mother. She'd gotten along fine without one. Toward evening she got up and walked into the village. She passed the drugstore and went up the front path of the Stonehaven House Hotel. She hadn't been there for weeks, for fear of upsetting her new friend. Now she hoped that everybody in town would see her. Elias Cutter did. As he locked the bank, Mr. Cutter watched Polly cross the porch and slam the hotel door behind her. She made him feel that all of Stonehaven was soiled. Polly stood in the dim front hallway of the hotel. She smelled dust and decay. Then she heard Charlie screaming and swearing somewhere above her. She went up the stairs to the 4th floor. She looked across the rubble and saw Charlie pinned to the floor. "Now what have you done?" she demanded. "Get it off me!" Charlie barked at her. "Lift the foot—" Polly found the light switch. She flipped it, and the ceiling bulbs filled the wrecked space with glare. Polly climbed over the mess. Charlie was wearing an undershirt and grimy trousers. His face was dirty and streamed with sweat. A new yellowish light was in his eyes. "Lift it off of me!" he yelled. "Keep your shirt on," Polly snapped. She grabbed a side of the wall that lay across Charlie's thighs. She strained as she tried to lift it. The other side of the wall pressed down on Charlie. He howled, "You're breaking my goddamn legs!" Polly let go of the wall. It dropped 2 feet. Charlie shouted and cursed again. Polly looked down the length of the wall. "It's jammed between those studs," she said. "Where's your wrecking bar?" "How the hell do I know?" Charlie snapped. Polly pulled a small crowbar from beneath some splintered lath. She climbed over the rubble, falling twice and scratching her arms. She wedged the crowbar between the edge of the fallen wall and an upright stud. She pulled hard. The wall wouldn't move. She tugged harder, popping 2 buttons on her shirt. Her hair tumbled down, and she took off her bandana. She was perspiring. "What the hell are you folks playing?" Polly turned around. McGraw was standing almost at the top of the stairs. His revolver hung low on his hip. His bulk seemed to fill the stairwell. "Get this goddamn thing off of me!" Charlie gasped. "She's as useless as tits on a bull." McGraw climbed across the littered floor, took the crowbar from Polly, stuck its tip between the wall and the stud, and yanked once. The broken wall collapsed, tilting off Charlie. Charlie howled. McGraw helped him up. "You all in one piece?" "You could have broken both my legs," Charlie said, feeling his scrawny thighs. "I could have done a lot of things to you and didn't," McGraw said. "We've got 2 kids missing, Charlie. Looks like Willie Bill's gone, too. We need men who know the country back yonder. I thought you'd like to join up. God knows you've hunted enough deer," he looked at Polly, "and laid enough women out there." "Which kids?" Charlie demanded. "The Ellicott boy and the Drake girl." Charlie began to gather up his tools. "You and them can all go to hell." "There's talk of a reward," McGraw said. Charlie's mind filled with new fantasies. About the uplands, about Bentley Ellicott, about finding Bentley in the empty country and killing him, about reward money. "How much?" he demanded. "Everybody's meeting at the police station in a half hour," McGraw said. "Be there." He turned to Polly. "I want to talk to you. And I think maybe we better stop there and do a second video."